Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. I'll try to keep this one short, so let's get right into it. So recently, Amplifica Holdings updated their website with some new formatting, but more importantly, they've formally established their pipeline. We now have an idea of what molecules and compounds this company will be focusing on to treat androgenetic alopecia. We're looking at the pipeline over here. We know that AMP303 is based off of the glycoprotein osteopontin and is meant to modulate the CD44 receptor. So this means that the AMP303 is a synthetic derivative of osteopontin. And you can look at Dr. Max Amplificas' study involving the secretomes from senescent cells. And those senescent cells are melanocytes from hairy nevi, also known as hairy moles. So far, Amplifica has already tested AMP303 in humans, and it seems to have caused some hair growth and transforming vellus hairs into non-vellus hairs, so maybe those hairs are intermediate hairs or terminal hairs. Now, let's move on to the other compounds in the pipeline. If we look at older news reports, specifically in an interview between Dr. Max Amplificas, and for those of you, again, maybe I didn't introduce this in the beginning, but Dr. Max Amplificas is Amplifica's chief scientific officer and a professor at UC Irvine. That's where he made all those discoveries with the melanocytes and the senescent cells and their secretomes and their possible benefits for hair growth, right? But in an interview, an old interview with DermWire, we learned that AMP203 was actually stated to be the original AMP compound that they were trying to run in their proof of concept clinical trial that they did on humans. But instead, as we know, they ended up using AMP303. But that being said, AMP203 is a synthetic derivative of osteopontin. Now, if we look at the pipeline again, I'm not sure why AMP506 is also on the same shared level of AMP203. It says AMP203 / AMP506. Perhaps that suggests that they are the same molecule with different names, or they're two different molecules that are meant to be co-administered, or they're going to be theoretically studying them at the same time, so doing two clinical trials at once. Actually, guys, I'm jumping in here real quick in the post-edit productions. If you look at the website on Amplifica, it mentions that they have 4 next-generation differentiating programs in the pipeline. So that kind of implies that AMP506 is different from AMP203. They might entirely be two different molecules, but they are derivative of osteopontin, or perhaps AMP506 is derivative of at least SCUBE3, and we'll touch on that shortly. But if you count the number of molecules that are in the pipeline, right, it is literally 4. AMP303, AMP203, AMP506, and AMP601. That's 4 different compounds or 4 different parts of a pipeline or whatever. So yeah, maybe AMP506 is different from AMP203 in the sense that it is a different derivative of osteopontin or some other glycoprotein. And finally, AMP601 is SCUBE3, and we can get this sort of understanding by looking at Amplifica's own statements on their website. One of their older, press reports, they did state that AMP601 would be SCUBE3 or SCUBE3. Now, I actually talked to Dr. William Rassman before, and he mentioned how Dr. Max Amplificas found these glycoproteins and how they were important for hair growth. Interestingly, in that interview, it's implied that there are hundreds of identified glycoproteins and secretomes that Dr. Max Amplificas noted, but some seemed more common than others. And here we have osteopontin and SCUBE3, which seems to be what this company is mainly focusing their derivative compounds around.
If you take a look at everything that's been done to date, the real the last drug to hit the market, the last time anything really significant happened was the introduction of finasteride in mid-1990s. Okay, and since then there has been no breakthrough on the market at all. So there's a man, and it's an important story. A young man who comes to my office looking for a job, and he's 19 years old. And he's an immigrant from Belarus. Okay?
Yeah.
He speaks English, okay. And he says, "Can I have a job working for you?" And I said, "Sure." And I gave him a job as a technician. And we trained him as a technician, but he picked it up real fast. And then shortly after that, he left me and went to college and then finished with his PhD at University of California, Irvine, and then he went off on a fellowship to the University of Pennsylvania with one of the great men in hair. And then he comes back and becomes the kind of the associate chair of that department at UCI, and he starts applying for grants, and all of his ideas get funded very quickly by the government funding. So all of a sudden he's pulling in a lot of money, and he came up with this clever idea. He says he looks at these people who have hairy moles. You ever see a hairy mole on a person?
Yeah.
A little black mole, and they got a bunch of hair growing out there, and you have to cut the hair because it grows as long as your head hair. Okay, so he says, now there's something wrong here. He says that mole shouldn't be growing scalp hair. So he says there must be something unique. So what he did is he took the mole, ground it up, because a human mole, and ground it up, and then he ran it through a machine called mass spectrometry, and he identified all the proteins that were there in the mole. And he identified hundreds of unique proteins. And then he skimmed those down to the top 20, and then he skimmed them down to the top 5. And all of a sudden, we had drug candidates that needed to be tested. So I helped work with him a little bit at the University of California, Irvine. And we used human grafts. We got patients to volunteer to give up some grafts from their head. And we would transplant them in mice. And we would then set up two sets of controls. These were hairless mice, and one control would have an injection of some medication or saline, and the other one would have an injection of, let's say, Osteopontin, one of the drugs you're talking about. And lo and behold, the one that got the injection of Osteopontin within 3 weeks grew hair. The other one didn't do anything. And we kept doing this over and over again. And we saw that our model worked very nicely. And since then, we formed a company. He and I and one of our patients formed a company, invested enough money to get it started. And then we raised about $12 million last year. And,
oh, wow.
And now we have multiple drugs in the pipeline. We're going. The first one is going through clinical trials right now. They'll be out probably August, September. So I'm the medical director of that company, and I would love to see the results, but I'm not allowed to have that.
Yeah. So guys, all of this is some pretty encouraging stuff. Secretum research could be what gets us closer to a cure for all alopecia conditions. And not only that, but secretum research might be important for future therapies when it comes to tissue regeneration and even organ maybe cloning and, just general organoid improvements. So I'm so happy, and yeah, I think this company is going to go far. They're certainly one of the very few companies right now that are actually, in my opinion, close to, bringing a very, very good treatment to market, or possibly one of the best treatments to market. So to me, it's tied between Amplifica and surely Pelage Pharmaceuticals. But I think Pelage is closer to getting their PP405 to market because they're already in phase 2B in clinical trial testing. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace out.